Day after day, we have been getting articles about increasing regulation, regulators discussing issues with pricing with insurance companies, and today I have yet another article proposing additional regulations in the state of California. It's going to be a quick one. Let's dive in and see what this one is all about. So here we have legislative bill would support insurance fraud detectives. This is obviously coming from the Department of Insurance of the state of California. One of their PR people or marketing agency that they hired has written this article, and it's very positioned to push forward this Assembly Bill 2872. So it says Insurance Commissioner Ricardo Lara and Assembly Member Lisa Calderon, Chair of Assembly Insurance Committee, announced this past week that the State Senate of California Assembly has passed Assembly Bill 2872, which would support the work of sworn officers at the California Department of Insurance who are the state's leaders in preventing, stopping insurance fraud. So right here, I would argue that the number one fighters of insurance fraud are insurance companies themselves. No one is going to be more incentivized than the insurance companies to stop fraud. Obviously, they hone their resources to the most expensive fraud efforts. For example, if they notice a pattern in claims, large claims coming from one pharmacy in the middle of nowhere, they are going to investigate because it's just considered strange activity. So they see claims in a broad sense more so than an insurance commission's office. So I'm curious as to see how much the California Department of Insurance now is going to be in the business of these insurance companies and looking at claims. I wouldn't necessarily want anyone looking at my claims. In a similar context, it's outside of, I think, the scope that they're talking about here. I think they are talking more about homeowners insurance and workers' comp and liability insurance, but imagine the government being able to come in and just review all of your insurance claims at your insurance company. I mean, don't we have privacy legislation, privacy laws in place to protect our health privacy? Why should the state of California have the right to come in and look at all of those claims? When the insurance company has all of the information, they have all of the claims that I've submitted to them, I've agreed to submit it to them as a patron, as a customer of theirs, and they not only have claims patterns from me, but they also can see all other people, all other providers, all other doctors' offices and hospitals that are filing claims, and are just like a bank would be able to report suspicious activity and fraud activity. I don't see why the government would need to do that. Is now the government going to get involved with every single banking transaction at your bank to see what fraud is going on the banking level as well? I just think this is a not very well thought out argument as to why to pass more legislation, all again to protect you as a citizen, is what they're kind of positioning it as, because no one does it better than Governor Newsom and your California Department of Insurance leaders there. They're the ones you can trust. So this bill would help close the pay gap between the department's sworn fraud detectives and sworn officers and other state agencies, helping strengthen staff retention and enforcement efforts that protect public safety. So it gives them a raise. AB 2872 is headed by Governor Gavin Newsom's desk for his consideration. And they go to a quote here from Commissioner Lara, Insurance fraud is a multi-billion-dollar drain on our state's economy, perpetrated by organized crime, complex financial schemes that harm our most vulnerable, including seniors and immigrant communities. Stopping and preventing insurance fraud is critical to our state's economy and community safety. It is vital that we recruit and retain our committee, hardworking investigators charged with protecting customers. AB 2872 would raise the compensation for the department's detectives to match the compensation of special agents at the California Department of Justice who are in the same bargaining unit. This will close over a 20% pay gap currently between the two departments and help Department of Insurance recruit and retain more fraud detectives. This legislation not only supports the department's efforts to keep our constituents safe from fraud, but it is a significant milestone in establishing gender pay equity. The Department of Insurance currently employs more than 200 sworn officers to detect, investigate, respond to insurance fraud statewide. However, current pay equity among investigators' classifications has consistently undermined the department's ability to recruit and retain. So basically just the pay discrepancy between the two departments, I guess. So I think originally I read that as a dig on pay equity, but now that I'm rereading it, I believe that they're just stating that the two departments have a 20% difference and they need to get them on par. The department's current vacancy rate for this classification is over 35%. Many investigators citing pay inequity as a reason for leaving. So I read that originally inequity as in regards to female versus male pay. And it does say here the department boasts one of the highest percentages of women in law enforcement, not only within the state, but also across the entire nation. So they are referring to inequity between men and women, but I don't understand exactly why they're blaming that when they're the ones who hired the people and set up the jobs to begin with. But in fact, over the past 2 years, more than 75% of the transfers out of the Department of Insurance have been in the Department of Justice. Coalition Against Insurance Fraud estimates that national economic impact of insurance fraud is $308.6 billion each year, almost. So what drives me crazy about these articles, and I haven't finished reading it yet, and maybe we'll get to an example, but tell me what these 200 people have done. How much fraud has been stopped as a result of these detectives that you have hired? Give an example. Tell us a story about one of these people. I mean, our tax money, everyone knows that California is one of the highest tax state in the union. You know, why we want to know exactly what dollars are going where and how that money is being spent. At least give us a nice story of some old lady that got saved, a couple $100,000 from one of your agents. Or tell us it was increasing by 10% every year, and ever since we started this department or hired these people, that has slowed down. Or because we're down 35% in this department, we've noticed an uptick in crime or in fraud. Or tell us how the insurance companies lean on you for these resources and how residents lean on you for these resources, and give a specific example. So that's one of the things that really drives me crazy about this. Instead, they drone on about women's inequality in law enforcement and how they need to raise pay. I would assume that anybody that's working for this department, regardless of if they're male or female, are making the same amount, especially if they're working for the California Department of Insurance. The only way I could see this being inequity of pay would be that perhaps their pay is so low that the only people that they can recruit are females, because females tend to be the ones that are accepting the lower pay because they believe in the effort that this unit is bringing forward, and they are not as driven by money. They're more driven by purpose, perhaps, in this category of employment, and are willing to take a little bit less of a pay. I don't really know why exactly, but I would imagine, if the pay equity is an issue, then you were organization that was paying 20% less than your competitors, and women make, about 10 to 20% less on average than men, then you have a department full of women and you're upset about that. I don't know. I'm just a little bit critical of the state of California and government in general. The Coalition Against Insurance Fraud estimates the national economic impact of insurance fraud is $308.6 billion each year, almost 1,000 per year for every single American. Specific to California, they estimate there are $17.2 billion in economic losses in the state each year due to insurance fraud, which result in higher costs for California consumers and businesses. Department's fraud division receives 22,000 suspected fraud claim referrals each year, which represents over $600 million in suspected losses. Okay, so there's some interesting information. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And I certainly don't disagree that fraud is an issue and that it should be stopped. Cases of insurance fraud include, but are not limited to, injured workers not receiving proper medical treatment, innocent victims of staged auto collisions, patients victimized by medical providers conducting unnecessary medical procedures for profit, substance abuse patients trafficked to collect insurance money. The department's sworn fraud investigators work directly with local, regional, and federal law enforcement partners, as well as the insurance industry, from detection through prosecution. Just last year, the department submitted 860 cases to district attorney offices for review. We train our investigators to be the best in the business, and we want to keep them here at the California Department of Insurance to continue doing this vital public safety work, added Commissioner Lara. I believe AB 2872 is needed to help recruit and retain these hard-working law enforcement officers so we can continue to protect consumers and bring perpetrators to justice. Newsom has until September 30th, 2024 to act on the bill. So my question now is, what else is in this bill? Because I would be shocked if there is an assembly bill that only talks about increasing to a pay to their fraud unit employees, these 200 employees, and that's it. That's all that's in the bill. So let's look into that. Okay, here is an article from the Insurance Journal. California legislature passes a bill to support insurance fraud detectives. California lawmakers pass a bill to help close the pay gap between California Department of Insurance fraud detectives and officers in other state agencies. The California Senate and Assembly this week passed Assembly Bill 2872, which support the work of sworn officers at the CDI who work to prevent and stop insurance fraud. AB 2872 would raise the compensation for CDI detectives to match the compensation of special agents at the California Department of Justice who are in the same union bargaining unit. The bill will close an over 20% pay gap between the two departments and help the department recruit and retain more fraud detectives, according to CDI. The department employs more than 200 sworn officers to detect, investigate, and respond to insurance fraud. The department's vacancy rate is set above 35%. The department's fraud division reports receiving 22,000 suspected fraud claims referrals each year, representing more than $600 million in suspected losses. This bill is supported by Commissioner Ricardo Lara and Lisa Calderon, chair of the Assembly Insurance Committee. AB 2872 is now headed to Governor Newsom's office. So Looks like the bill is fairly straightforward to increase pay to these fraud detectives and make sure that they're on par with other departments within the government. It seems pretty benign and straightforward. We'll certainly keep an eye on this and other legislation that is important in insurance news. Thank you for hanging out until the end, and we'll see you next time.